Hi, I'm Jeremy Sinemaki, the Veterans Employment and Training Services Director with Veterans Florida. And we're here today with Troy Underwood and Rob Carilla. We're going to discuss acquiring a veteran owned business and some experiences we have with that and some things to know. So, Troy, would you please introduce yourself and talk about your experience with acquiring businesses?
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. I'm Troy Underwood, and I'm the owner of Tampa Steel and Supply. I grew up in a military family. My dad was a retired colonel in the Army, and I did 9 years as an officer in the Army Reserves. And Tampa Steel and Supply, we're a metal service center located in Ybor, and it's been a business that's been around since 1983. I purchased the company about 3 years ago after running it for 4 years for the former owner and founder. He was at that point when I came on board was an absentee owner, and I was able to purchase the company through my own cash injection as well as an SBA loan that I secured. And I'm a firm believer in self-development and continuing education. And so I would like to thank you, Jeremy, and Veterans Florida for sponsoring me in the entrepreneurship program that I went through last year to help me in this endeavor. So I really got a lot of value out of that, and thank you.
Thanks for being on the panel. This is a great wealth of experience that you have that you're going to share with our veteran business owners. Rob is a veteran, is a board member on Veterans Florida Board of Directors. And Rob, would you please introduce yourself and discuss your experience with acquiring businesses?
Sure. Hey, I'm Rob Carilla, and as Jeremy mentioned, I am a board member on Veterans Florida. I am also a veteran of the Army and left approximately almost 5 years ago. And after having run a couple of companies for other people, decided to start my own. And specifically, we are a company, a partnership of investors who are looking to make acquisitions of lower middle market companies in the Southeast, primarily. Florida is one of our biggest markets. And then after we make the acquisition, we look to bring in experienced veterans who have the capacity to grow the value of those companies. And we specifically, Jeremy, have identified these veterans because we believe that in very special cases, they possess the leadership experience, the academic background, and the private sector experience that would enable them to grow a company. And often the only thing they lack is the capital necessary to make that acquisition. So we walk alongside them as the majority shareholder. And as I was explaining to Troy, our intent is to award a little bit of equity to our operating partner on the front side. And then when we get to the 5 or 6 year mark, we have a discussion with them such that we ask them about their interest in becoming the owner, the principal owner of these companies. And if that's the case, then great, we will help them with the capital resources to make that happen. And so anyway, we're very excited about it. We think that the Southeast, again, is the most dynamic market in the country right now, both in terms of economic scale, but also demographics and internal migration in the United States of workers and raw products and infrastructure. So we really like it, and we're happy to be with you here today, Jeremy.
Thank you. And I agree. Florida is a great place to open up a business or acquire a business. And veterans seem to have the skills necessary to be able to do that. So, Troy, I want to go back to you and discuss maybe what sparked your interest in acquiring Tampa Steel. What was the thing that drew you to acquiring that company?
Well, when I took the position as president of the company for the former owner, again, who was an absentee owner, it was with the mutual intent of kind of test driving the business for a couple of years to see if it was something that I wanted to invest my nest egg into and purchase the business from him. He was kind of looking at exiting. I really didn't know the metal industry. I knew the building industry, I knew businesses, but the metal industry was something that was completely new to me, and I just wanted to understand it a little bit more. And so I went in with saying, "Hey, let me run it for a couple of years. We'll see what happens. At the very least, I've built the business up for you to help in the valuation and selling. I'll help you through that transition. If it's something that I feel I want to invest in, then we'll have those discussions." And after seeing the impact that I made in those first 2 years, combined with what I felt the long-term outlook was for the business, I knew that it was something that I could continue to grow, improve upon, and ideally create a return from. And so that's kind of what started the acquisition process.
Well, that's great. Rob, you have experience with helping quite a few veterans acquire their business. What sparked your interest in doing that and helping veterans acquire businesses?
Well, look, I want to be very frank. We believe that there is value that a veteran brings. And so this is a for-profit entity. And we are not, we don't espouse handouts and that sort of thing. The veterans that we hire, we screen, but we, like I said, we believe they have a better than base case, which is a non-veteran, right? A better than base case opportunity to scale and grow the company as a way to generate returns for our investors. And so the secondary impact is that by using this talent that I think a lot of America overlooks or is unaware of, we like so many other stories out there, we see the value, we stop and pick it up and employ it. And I think that Troy's example is a great one. We're looking right now, Jeremy, at a company up in South Carolina, and the owner is a fantastic American who's grown this company from the back of his pickup truck to a multi-million-dollar company. But he knows where his limitations are. And he knows that in order to take it from, let's say, and this isn't exactly the right figure, but let's just say for the purpose of this illustration, the company's at 5 million now. He knows that what got him to 5 million isn't going to get him to 15. And so in order to bring on some of the advanced management and leadership and financial management that is necessary to really continue to grow this company, he needs to look for a high-powered individual. And so the reason that he chose us to work with was because we do have access to proven leaders who are veterans, who have gone on to get their advanced, degrees. Many of those are MBAs, and who have spent 2, 3, 4 years in the private sector, running a P&L, understanding some of the way cash moves through a company and how to do it better, has an understanding of sales, has an understanding of marketing, and most of all, has the type of emotional intelligence that's necessary to deal with customers and suppliers and employees and that sort of thing. And that's why we like them. We think it makes a great deal of sense. And, we feel like at this point, we don't have that much competition to get these highly talented individuals. And so it's really just finding them of which we're always looking for those folks, and then plugging them into an opportunity that we feel will allow them to really put their talent to work.
Yeah, that's great. So I understand, Rob, you actually go looking for the veteran that would run the business that you acquire. But how would somebody who decides they want to acquire a certain business go about starting the process?
Yeah, and I'll answer this briefly. I think that maybe we punt this to Troy, but from our perspective, let's say we've got a veteran in Orlando, and he has the opportunity, for however he gained it, he has the opportunity to buy a business service company that's making $1.5 million a year in free cash flow, and has an enterprise value, let's say $5-6 million. And he says to himself and his wife, hey, this is a fantastic opportunity, but our traditional access to capital might not be sufficient for us to acquire this company. And whether it's the SBA or other traditional lenders, it is a scary thing to leverage your company. Anything over 50%, we discourage. It erodes any cushion for the business, and for the business acquirer. And so, when that becomes the case, and he says, hey, look, I know I can grow this. I know this is a long-standing profitable company. Then he should look for us. He should look for Black Powder Holdings, which is our holding company. And then we can start a discussion. And clearly, he can go to blackpowderholdings.com and fill in the data questionnaire and set up a meeting with one of the partners to discuss what the parameters of his proposal might look like, and how he would want to participate. Troy, help me out. What was your sort of experience?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I went in with the intent of potentially buying it. And, once I saw it viable, I started crafting a non-binding letter of intent for the owner that we were going to use as the framework to negotiate terms and kind of eventually be our purchase agreement. And in the first pass of that letter of intent, there was a big spread between my initial offer and what he wanted. And so we came to the point where we agreed upon like an independent appraisal of the business, which we used to kind of calibrate one another. And once that non-binding letter of intent was agreed upon and signed, I used it to have my lawyer draft a legal purchase agreement. And so those three documents, the non-binding letter of intent, the draft of the purchase agreement, and the appraisal is what I used to in my financial package to solicit to various vendors for financing. I had no idea about Black Powder. I wish I did at the time. I went the traditional route, met with like 5 different banks, and that was probably my first big challenge that I faced, was getting through that hurdle and making sure that I could work within the cash injection that I could, plus have a line of credit that I need to run the company from day one. Again, I was fortunate to know what was going on with the business, in terms of the day-to-day and what it was creating. But there was a lot of things that even once I got past that acquisition that I had no idea about and kind of had to, learn through fire.
Right. And I would say, Jeremy, one of the things that we do for a guy like Troy. So if Troy had come to us and said, hey, I've got this great company, I've been running it, I know how to do it, and I'd like to structure a deal. This is the capital I have, whatever. We've got a group of experts, and this is all they do. and structuring financial strategies and plans for acquisition, post-acquisition, understanding how to inject capital for inorganic growth versus organic growth, the types of things and management assistance that I think that really people can benefit from. There is a huge amount of value there, especially for someone who, as Troy said, hey, I knew how to run the company, but when it was mine, every decision became more critical. And as a result, he a guy again, but he's a great example of a guy that can make it. And that's exactly the talent that we're looking for. We just can help him get there quicker. And with, clearly you can see he's lost all his hair. That's not,
I need one of those hats is what I need. That will help.
I need to get you a hat.
I'm expecting my black powder hat any day now in the mail.
So you brought up a good point, Troy, about some of your challenges with capital, and I'm sure you had quite a few other challenges. And it sounds like Rob had you known about Black Powder Holdings, could have maybe helped you with some of those challenges.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure the challenges you faced made you a better business owner, learning from them. So would you mind talking about some of the challenges you faced and how maybe you overcame them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first challenge for me was calibrating the owner's value versus what I thought the business was worth. He saw Rolex and I was trying to buy Timex. And that's where that independent valuation was helpful. And kind of once we got past that and agreed upon the terms, the next was getting that financing piece. And I was really trying to work a deal with a lender that could help me make the deal with a cash injection of around 10 to 15%, which was a challenge because most wanted 20 to 30% down. And some were pre-approved SBA lenders, or I forget the terminology that they had for those preferred lenders. But I also wanted to have a line of credit to help me operate the business day one. So, I really narrowed it down at that point to 2 different lenders because pretty much everybody else didn't fit into that box. And that last piece of getting that line of credit was extremely helpful because my next challenge or first challenge after owning the business and was all these suppliers and vendors that didn't see me anymore as the guy that had been running the business for the last several years. I was a new dude, a new person. And so several of the terms and credit lines that were in place all of a sudden were either gone or cut drastically. And so this put us in like a real cash tight first year. And so I think that's where I lost all that hair, was just, waking up every day, like going, hey, I'm buying from this company where I had, a $100,000 credit line and I'm spending $25,000 a week with them and they've cut my line to 25 grand. That's, I've got to give that, I'm paying them every week versus once every month. And so it put me in a real tight cash flow situation. And we were fortunate to get out of that. But, that was something that was a real big challenge for me. I mean, cash is king in a small business. And so when you got everything invested into that company, it keeps you up at night. I didn't have that when I was just the president of the company, but having run it for, the 3-4 years, I was able to see things and knew how to move the levers to make stuff work and work some deals. Had I not had that experience of running that business, I think I could have, bankrupted myself because if I just didn't know how to manage cash or know where to buy certain things from or leverage other people, it would have been a challenge. And if I didn't have that credit line in place, it would have been tough.
Did the resources that Veterans Florida has help you overcome any of those challenges you had?
Well, I'd say, I went through Action Zone entrepreneurial course, the co-starters. One of the first things that I did when I purchased the business was to register myself as a veteran-owned business. And part of that process is I got familiarity with Veterans Florida, and they talked about this entrepreneurship program. And as I mentioned, I'm all about continuing development and learning more, and also really building a kind of a board of advisor team. I mean, I'm a pretty good sized company. We're, 5 to 6 million a year. So I've got, some resources with the cash flow that we have, but not enough to have my own board. And so it was great to go in there. I was able to help that group out, because they were ranged from people that were just had an idea to people like me that had a mature growing business. So we're able to share with each other. And so I got new ideas. One of the ideas I worked through helped me through COVID times, which was, how I could leverage this piece of machinery that I just purchased for $300,000, and during the course of this cash tight period, we were able to buy this machinery because I knew where we needed to go. And the program really helped me think of how I could leverage that thing and keep it running. Because if it's not running, I'm not making any money. I'm not able to make the payments on it. But everything that I learned through there was great. And it's carried over into other aspects. I'm very tight with the people at Action Zone now, and I rely on them. When I have a question in business or I have a challenge that I'm having now, I reach out to them. Also through Veterans Florida, I got aware of Bunker Labs. And so I'm involved in their CEO circle. And, I've been through about 5 meetings so far. And it's great to be able to bounce ideas and talk to people that are going through the same thing that I'm going through now, because it can be lonely as an entrepreneur and lonely as an owner, especially in a small company. And, I think for somebody coming in and being able to work with like a Black Powder Holdings to be able to say, hey, listen, how can I, handle this situation? Or I got this people issue, or I got this financial issue. Having somebody be able to give you that input, I think would be, very valuable to somebody. Even as somebody that came into a business, I had, 20 plus years of experience in sales and operations management and general management, but none of that prepared me for, to manage the business as an owner and knowing that cash was coming out of my pocket, each and every day, each and every month.
Right. I couldn't agree more about the networking piece and having other people you can talk to about your challenges and how to overcome them. Sometimes people see things that you can't see past.
Right.
But Rob, I'd like to come back to you because you probably see a lot of recurring challenges with acquiring companies, and you probably assist with a lot of those. But is there anything that stands out as a common challenge aside from capital that maybe your resources or Veterans Florida's resources can assist with overcoming?
Well, so yes, I'll cover a few that I think are significant challenges. Challenge one is finding the right opportunity. I think that our basis or our model has to do with putting together investors, operating partners, and sellers, acting as the connective tissue between those three things. And Jeremy, I don't think I have to tell you, but sellers are very likely to be very sensitive with their information and only release information that is that supports their particular valuation, as Troy mentioned. That doesn't mean that there's any sort of nefarious activity, but it's their baby, and no one calls their baby ugly, right? And so our challenge is, number one, finding them. So we'll look at 100 companies and maybe think 4 or 5 are worthwhile. And we're looking, like I say, beyond Florida. We're looking at the Carolinas and Georgia, and we are looking in Tennessee. We think that's a great market. We like Texas. We like everything to do with Texas. But for us, number one challenge to overcome is finding the right deal in the right market, in the right industry that is able to generate, to mitigate risk, right? Because at the end of the day, again, Troy mentioned it. For me, when he's talking, my little antenna are pricking off as he's talking about some of the challenges he faced. Our role is to understand what those are and figure out where we can mitigate those sorts of things that keep him up. And that might be state tax situations, right? Of which Florida is a fantastic one, especially for veterans. It might be access to suppliers with a low sort of transportation cost. Again, Florida's great, has a huge amount of ports and highways and the infrastructure that's necessary to do that. But that doesn't mean, a place like Texas isn't. But those are some things we're looking at. And we're also looking for, industries that we believe generate recurring revenue that offsets risk to the market, whether, we have an up or a down market. We want to avoid cyclicals as much as we can. Anyway, those are some of the challenges with finding the company. Then the next challenge is agreeing on a value. And I think Troy was being kind. Everyone thinks that they're driving a Mercedes, where 90% of us are driving Chevys and Fords. And having or Rolexes and Timexes, right? I think that's the metaphor he used. And having the ability to have a third party, that's an interesting take. That's an expense, clearly. And in some industries, it counts. In other industries, it doesn't. But having the ability to have the preponderance of the data that you can share with the owner, I think is really, really important. And that's a place where Veterans Florida and the university systems of Florida can really help, because they can help a veteran get access to these high quality business databases. I will tell you that there is this whole network of business brokers out there, most of whom are good and competent and realistic, but there are some that are not, right? There are some that would have you sort of believe that the value of the company is X, and it's just not. We're being as pleasant as I can be. But that's the second challenge. And then the third challenge is getting access to capital. For the vast majority of Americans, and definitely veterans, I don't suspect they have an awareness of this vast pool of capital that is private and institutional capital and has nothing to do with banks and has nothing to do with debt. But I think that most think of it like as they're going to buy a car or a house. Hey, I've got enough for the down payment and, maybe a year's worth of maintenance. And then I'll go borrow someone else's money to make the acquisition. And then all I've got to do is make sure my profit is more than enough to service the debt and pay for the company and pay for all my other requirements and, put gas in my car, right? As the owner. Whereas there is this huge industry that is out there, Jeremy, that exists to invest in companies that they think they can generate a better return than buying, for instance, Bitcoin, right? I mean, think about the risk associated with Bitcoin. Everyone likes to talk about the upside, but no one likes to talk about the fact that it can go to zero And so anyway, I think that that is the third piece. And what I would share with you is, in my experience, there are great American investors all over the country, in every small, medium, and large city, that have capital and want to invest in high value companies. And it's just a benefit to them that they get to do so for a veteran. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I agree with that. And probably the only thing I would add is that, you know, a lot of business owners have trouble, especially right now, finding skilled workers, and Veterans Florida can definitely assist with that as well. And these would be military veteran workers. So if you need assistance with that aspect, once you acquire that business, we can definitely assist with that. But if Troy, if it was all a downside and all a challenge, I doubt anybody would ever want to acquire a business. So there has to be some highlights. Would you like to talk about some highlights of your experience acquiring your Tampa Steel?
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, obviously, we navigated that, first year cash tight, and even, purchase that 300 piece of machinery that I talked about. For me, that was a highlight, just getting through that. And hey, we actually were more profitable that year than with less sales than we had been before. I mean, I bought the company, and all of a sudden in January, tariffs hit. I didn't know anything about steel tariffs, and whammo, that hit. And then this past year, COVID, we've gone through COVID. So really my first 2 full years of owning the business had some dynamic challenges. And so for me, just getting those through and being profitable and creating more cash, certainly we were fortunate to leverage, different funding out there with PPP and things like that, that we became aware of because of my networking. And a lot of that was generated through Veterans Florida and people that they put me in touch with, just building this, team of advisors. Other highlights, we were nominated after my first year as Small Business of the Year for the Greater Tampa Bay Chamber. Just being nominated was huge for me. We didn't win, but the fact that we got recognized, that was great. And then the Business Observer in 2020 recognized us as a top 500 company in the Florida Gulf Coast. So it was kind of nice to see, the company that I was running, in the magazine, and we were getting some, recognition. And so for me, that was a highlight. But, the biggest highlight is just, that we're, able to keep this business growing and going. I do it side by side with my wife. And, this is our retirement nest egg, if you will. So, we want to grow this business, get it to a level. And I really see that we're able to probably, double the business by the middle of this decade, and hopefully double it again by the end. And some of that takes getting the right people and making the right decisions. And every day is a challenge, but, I wouldn't get out of bed and come here if I didn't think it was worth it.
Yeah, I agree. It's got to be worth it. And Rob, I'm going to come back to you because I'm sure, you experience many rewards from the businesses you acquire. Would you like to discuss some of those highlights with the audience?
Well, what I would say is, first off, so as to speak with complete transparency, we just started last year, so we don't have this sort of huge portfolio of businesses, although much like Troy, that is our intent. What I would say is, just sitting here listening to Troy, it's just a great story of initiative, right? Because he could have continued to do the things that he was doing without assuming, the risk of being an owner. But he didn't, and he took the step, and he took the risk. And what I would say is that with very few exceptions, only in America can you do that. This idea that America loves business owners is, I think, a very true statement. And I would also say that business owners, God bless them, they have this huge mantle of responsibility for completing projects, for taking, for employing and providing for their employees and their families, for taking care of all the 1,001 different things that Troy works on every day that that they go unaware. And so when I think about this thing, I think that I spent, a quarter of a century defending the rights and idea of the United States of America. And only after leaving the service have I been introduced and gotten to know more about the engine of America. And the engine of America are the businesses and their owners and their employees that are making things, that are doing things, and that are providing for. It's their effort that provides, for the safety and security and prosperity of America. So, it is guys like Troy that I'm inspired by.
Right. So, are there any particular pitfalls that you would like to warn against, Rob, or anything that should make you run?
In my mind, Jeremy, if you, it's all about the financials. When you're acquiring a company, there's a big difference between a startup and an acquisition, right? And a startup, it's a completely different idea in terms of sourcing, in terms of capitalization, in terms of growth. It's a different ecosystem that I don't know as much about. But when you're acquiring in a company, you've got to start and end with the financials, because that is the basis by which a value is created. And in our sort of industry, I hear this a million times. If you make a bad deal on the front side, it could take you 20 years to recover. And so when you are making the acquisition, we really want to encourage our people to get the types of professional help so that they understand the financials, right? And I don't mean that they can read a 3-statement financial summary. That's fabulous. That is the very basics. And but being able to really normalize earnings, understand anomalies, understand cyclicality, and be able to create a way to look at, as Troy mentioned, hey, what happens if my cost of goods, my raw materials goes up by 10%, or that my demand for production goes down 10%? What are the tools that I have from a financial or an operational perspective to mitigate that? I think that those are the types of things that we really work with our acquisitions. That's where we spend the majority of our time. Again, if we do that groundwork, we're able to talk to investors and say, hey, look, we've got this thing. We understand it completely. We can mitigate, future problems. We can maximize future opportunities. And those folks will say, absolutely, we'd love to partner with you on this. We see your vision. Banks, I suspect, would do the same thing, but maybe with less enthusiasm, but I don't know that. And operating partners, right? As Troy mentioned, he feels like he's always got to be learning. That is we believe that to be a true statement as well, because the minute that Troy retires to the beach that he's actually sort of taping in his background, is the minute he needs to be looking for someone to run his company or to make an exit.
Yeah, I agree. Troy, do you have anything you'd like to add to that regarding some pitfalls or things to warn against?
Yeah, I think Rob hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, the biggest thing for me, in going through the acquisition is I knew where the numbers were, and the owner that was buying from the business, he had a number in his head. He didn't know how he got there. He just knows this is what I want for it. And so that calibration was a challenge. I knew the financials, and the downside is I had done such a good job in that first 2 years. It was having record sales. So he's like, hey, you can continue this thing. And that's what he saw that value in. And I had to really say, hey, but here is what, the last 5 years and what that trend has been. And here's what the banks are going to tell me. Here's what the banks are going to ask me, is, winter is going to come again, right? It's not going to be all summer. We're making the hay while the sun is shining. There's going to be a winter, and I got to be able to pay that note back. I got to be able to have the right debt service ratio, all those things to be able to qualify. So it was really a challenge of getting that is the first piece. And so I think knowing the business the way I did, because I knew the numbers. I knew the numbers better than he knew the numbers, because I was running the business for him. If I was coming in from the outside and, as Rob said, they just gave me the numbers that they wanted to give, it could tell whatever story. I fortunately knew, hey, here's what your value has been. Here's what you haven't pulled out of the company. Here's what could happen. All these different scenarios helped me, but I still didn't know it all. So, I think another pitfall is thinking that you know it all. I was not prepared at all for the reaction I got from the suppliers. And had I not gotten that credit line from my lender, from the get-go, I would have been in trouble, because I pulled almost all of that money within the first month just to be able to continue to operate. And within the first year, I paid that, credit line down, and I haven't touched the credit line since, fortunately, because we've been doing so well, even during these downturns. But I know it's there. I know that if I get in a jam, I can leverage it. So for me, the pitfall is, not having the deal done right up front, both in terms of the acquisition and where you're financing in, and then thinking that you know it all. You need to continually be, networking and reaching out to the services like Veterans Florida have, reaching out to other people that are veterans. What I found is veterans like to help veterans. And, it's amazing that the information that I'm able to get from some people that I think is, well, why would they tell me their secret? They're happy to share it because, they're proud of what they did, and they don't want to see other entrepreneurs fail.
Yeah, I agree. So if I had to sum up what you both just said, don't just assume that you can turn everything around, and seek professional help when looking at the numbers and making the deals. So you want the accountants, the lawyers, and things to be advising you on those things, right?
Yeah, you want to know the business. It's going to help in your evaluation and knowing what you need, because the money can go fast. And if you don't have cash in a business, you're not going to, it's going to be hard to sustain and hard to make it successful, and if you want to grow it, like I want to grow it, everything I'm doing now is to build to know that, hey, I can't spend what I'm spending now and think I'm going to double it. I got to think and make sure where I put that money that I'm going to get the best return. And guess what? I'm probably going to make a mistake, and so it's like how you limit the hurt on that mistake. So as Rob said, you're not dealing with it 20 years from now. I want to get this business going in 10 years. I don't want to be doing the things that I'm doing now, but I want this business to be, a continual flow of cash for me.
So Troy, is there any other advice you would give to somebody who's interested in acquiring an existing business?
Well, I would say, I mean, not knowing what I know about black powder, I'd say definitely reach out and talk to people like Rob. If I'm a veteran and think that I want to get into a business, or maybe I'm, an operational guy right now and think that, hey, I've got some entrepreneurial spirit, I would reach out and talk to see what those opportunities are. I was fortunate that the right opportunity came to me. I knew that I wanted to buy a business. I had no idea what business I wanted to buy. I certainly didn't know steel, but through a connection is how I found the opportunity that I had. So, reach out to somebody like Rob. And then I'd say reach out to the veteran community. Start with Veterans Florida and see, where, what programs are available. Like I said, the entrepreneurial program I went with in Action Zone was amazing for me. And then the networking with Bunker Labs has been, phenomenal for me and helped me, continue my growth, and then I also look for other experts outside of that as well. I got a financial guy that I tap into. I got a legal guy that I tap into, and not that they have all the answers, but it's an exchange of ideas. And generally somebody's gone through what I'm going through now before. And if I can, learn through what crises they've had and how to get on the other side of it and create my new, business as usual, and avoid that crisis, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. So thanks for coming on, Rob. We'll close with you. What other advice would you give somebody interested in acquiring a business?
Well, I would, I think Troy is just an amazing guy, and he had some great ideas. And the only thing I would sort of add to this, and even though he touched on it, is that there is a difference between running a business and owning a business. And there will be higher highs and lower lows. And when you're running a business, CEO, COO, president, you are exposed certainly to the downside and the upside. When you're owning the business, the downside's greater, but so is the upside. And at the end of the day, the buck stops here, right? It's exactly the case. And so if anyone's going to lose sleep, it starts with Troy, and his wife, maybe. But so when you're thinking about it, it's really important to be honest with yourself and have a good awareness of who you really are and how badly you want it. Because if those roots are shallow, they will be pulled up at the first storm. And as Troy said, winter storms are coming. It's not a question of when or if, but when. And so, do you have the moral commitment or individual commitment to weathering the winter and getting back to the spring? That would be what I would say. I think that it's just really important. And for those few people, God bless you. America certainly blesses you. And rely on your friends and your connections to help, because they will, just like Troy mentioned, they will help, when you ask them.
Well, that's great advice that you gave today, and thank you for giving your testimonies on acquiring businesses, and hopefully we can help some veterans that are interested in going this route. Would either of you like to share any contact information, LinkedIn, email address, or anything if they wanted to reach out and find out more about Black Powder Holdings or Tampa Steel?
Sure.
I'm listed on LinkedIn as Troy Underwood. Obviously, I have a company website, Tampa Steel and Supply. The LLC that I use to start the company is Urban Metals. And we've created a web store to sell some metal art we're now creating, which actually came from my entrepreneurial class that Veterans Florida put me through. And that is urbanmetals.design. And all that's available through our website, www.tampasteel.com. And my email is troy@tampasteel.com. So anybody can reach out to me that way.
Right. And, as he mentioned, Black Powder Holdings is on Facebook and LinkedIn, and they can always go to our website, which is probably the best place to start. And that is very simply www.blackpowderholdings.com. And we would love to talk with you, whether you have an idea, a connection, an opportunity, or you're an investor. Plenty of veteran investors out there that want to give back in that way, and we'd love to include them in our holding.
Great. And as they mentioned, we have quite a few resources at Veterans Florida, and you can reach us at www.veteransflorida.org. Thank you for joining us today.